Paging Tom and Chuck. Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Engaging Stakeholders breakout. My name is Julie Shapiro. I'm your facilitator this morning with Keystone Policy Center and Honeybee Health Coalition. We've been talking about engaging stakeholders over the course of the past day, but we're taking a deeper dive today into what does it take, what are the lessons, what are the tips for really making sure that the stakeholders in your state are getting to the table and participating effectively in MP3 development. So just by way of a little introduction, our objective today is to hear about and understand different models that are being used in various states and share learnings, what worked, what didn't, and share tips for success. You'll hear from a variety of presenters. I will introduce them as we go through the day. We'll start with about 10-minute presentations from each of them, and then we'll ask them all up to the front and we'll do Q&A and open discussion. We want to hear from those of you in the audience as well about what you're doing in your states or what you've seen, what works, what doesn't. So just some key topics to be thinking about, and these are the topics I've asked our presenters to think about as well. First of all, identifying stakeholders. Who impacts pollinator health in your state? Who is impacted by pollinator health, and therefore who impacts and would be impacted by the MP3? And how should outreach be conducted? Are there specific ways that people prefer to be engaged or that work better than others? I also asked our presenters to think about communications and expectation setting. So what is the stakeholder role in the MP3 development, the finalization of that plan, implementation and evaluation? And how is that being communicated? Particularly, how are final decisions being made? Who owns that? Those are important things to be thinking about from the start of your process. What models for engagement are you going to use? And this might be that different models work better in different contexts. So which approach works best for your state and your stakeholders? How will stakeholders be involved in developing that model? So, aside from the plan itself, do stakeholders have a voice in saying, this is how we're going to reach other stakeholders? Is there engagement on engagement, if you will? And there's all kinds of examples of models for engagement, and we've heard about a few different ones, but you can do surveys and opinion polling in different forms. You can do issue assessments and interviews. You can have advisory committees. You can hold public meetings or have online forums. You can use focus groups. You can have cross-sector or single sector discussion. Do you want to focus on certain segments of stakeholders one at a time, or do you want to get them all together, or both? You can do educational and learning forums and more. So there's lots of different models to use, and they're not mutually exclusive. And the question is, what's going to work best in your plan development? When it comes to a meeting itself, what tips have you garnered for effective stakeholder meetings? So I've asked our participants to reflect a little bit about this as well. What made the meeting a success, or what could have worked better? How did you set up objectives and ground rules? How did you structure the meeting? And importantly, how did you structure it to promote effective and multi-stakeholder dialogue? Another topic for discussion this morning is ongoing stakeholder engagement practices. So once the plan's developed, or if you've had an initial meeting about developing the plan, how are you keeping stakeholders informed or involved throughout development, finalization, implementation, and evaluation? So that's kind of just an overview of the questions that I'd like to have folks keep on their mind this morning. And we, again, have several presenters, starting with Ashley Jones, who's an entomologist from Pesticide Regulation, Maryland Department of Agriculture. So we're going to hear from Ashley. And come on up and get your presentation. And Ashley, we have a remote if you want it, or you can just stand at the podium.
Thank you.
So give me just 1 second. I'll make sure this is working. One last note, we are being recorded this morning, so be sure to use the microphones, whether you're presenting or asking a question. It seems we've lost our projection, so give me just 1 second. Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right,
And
thank you.
I will be time.
All right, thanks, Julie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming here to listen to this. So in Maryland, I guess the first thing, and it's the thing that we hear from everyone, is how different all states are. But we're going to go through kind of what we did, because maybe our stakeholder groups might not necessarily be the stakeholder groups that y'all are focusing on in your states and that type of thing. But I guess I'll just, first things first, and this was not prompted or requested from me, but to basically have just a plug right here. But we actually brought on Keystone Policy Center. Julie actually headed it up as our facilitation group to come in and help us with our meeting, and I just cannot praise them enough. They were fantastic, and basically everything, well, all the ideas of stakeholder outreach basically stemmed from them, so all credit to them. They planned out a lot of this for us. So basically kind of like our stakeholder overview, what we wanted to do is we definitely wanted to reach out to our stakeholders even before we had a stakeholder meeting. We wanted to know what kind of issues, what was going to be said at our meeting, to kind of be prepared for that, or kind of like, you know, make our schedule or our agenda kind of match up what the issues are. So I'll talk about the types of kind of pre-stakeholder meeting outreach that we did. We ended up deciding just on one large stakeholder meeting. I know that in larger states, there's been kind of a push for, you know, multiple smaller meetings, which absolutely makes sense. Maryland's not too big. There weren't many complaints about having to drive to the location where we had it. And then I'll talk about kind of the comments and review period. We absolutely want to engage our stakeholders in that process, but that'll kind of be done independently. Or if we really needed to, we might have smaller kind of steering committees based on stakeholder group, but I'll kind of get into that. Stakeholder groups, I mean, we've talked about this. As far as Maryland goes, obviously beekeepers, you know what I mean? We went for our state beekeeping association, we went for the smaller beekeeping associations that are more localized, crop producers, crop advisors, all of the listed under there. We have a lot, we wanted to have our nurseries involved, you know what I mean? That could be any, you know, and I guess not necessarily, okay, nursery, landscape, and greenhouse. So this is everything: golf course superintendents, turf grass specialists, nursery growers, applicators, arborists. We wanted to have everyone there because they all have a different viewpoint on it. You know what I mean? They're all involved. Absolutely, universities, extension, definitely. A big one for Maryland, because the issues that we're kind of dealing with, a lot of that is starvation and nutrient deficit and things like that. I really was getting our landowners, our utilities, right-of-way folks, state highway involved. I wanted to get all them having a discussion, because when are they ever all going to get together and be like, hey, you know, resource availability? They weren't, and they were so excited. I've never seen, I mean, literally our utility companies were like, thank goodness. I want to meet these other people, and we need to talk about this. And it was really cool. So that was certainly something that was a big subset. And then obviously other government entities there. One I don't have specifically listed here that was listed in a presentation yesterday is mosquito control. That's also a big one. Again, in Maryland, we're dealing with a lot of small-scale beekeepers, urban environments, a lot of types of complaints about mosquito control, and, you know, that, you know, they just have a lot of issues, so we needed to have some representation there. And they just happened to be housed under Department of Ag with us, so they came too to kind of just set that straight. And then obviously everyone else listed. Structural pest control should be included. I've been to presentations from National Pest Management Association, and they are pushing. They're requesting that states draw them also to the table. Again, for Maryland, we have a lot of urban environments, so they also are there at the table. As far as the types of kind of pre-meeting outreach that we did, we first started with electronic surveys. This was a really good way to just, you know, you tailor it to your specific stakeholder group, and you can just mass send it out. It's a good way to get a lot of input without having to have bodies specifically in a room. Again, this was to just try to understand what issues we're dealing with before our meeting. So we specifically really sent this out to our beekeeper groups, and we got, you know, hundreds of responses back. So that was some good information to have. Keystone also conducted phone interviews, which was great. And that's not like hundreds. There's like maybe 20, but you get kind of your industry leaders for each stakeholder group and get them on the phone and kind of really talk it out. It's a little more, obviously not face-to-face because they're on the phone, but a little more personal, than that approach. We also had registration questions for people that were coming to our stakeholder meeting, and those helped out a lot. That was a good way to kind of gauge what the thoughts were. So some of the questions that we were kind of looking at, what issues do you want to see in our plan? What solutions would you like to see? Things like that. What are the issues? What do you think are the issues? And then what types of data? There's a couple other questions, but that's kind of the main things we were focusing on. As far as invitations go, this one gets a little iffy. There's been discussion on who do you invite? How do you invite them? We went kind of for kind of the safer approach. We contacted association and organizations directly, requested either, I might have contacted the president or, a main representative, government rep or whatever, and asked for either them or a representative. We determined the number of seats kind of based on, I hate to say it, but I have up there relevancy to issues. So beekeepers had more seats, you know what I mean? And crop producers had more seats and things like that versus I happen to have a lot of seats for right away and utility folks also. As far as our summit structure, this was key. This was great. Keystone just nailed this. We wanted it to be really productive. We've heard horror stories of other states that have these meetings and have a rogue group come in and shut it down and it's not productive and you've put all that effort into it. So what we did is we had basically a bunch of small tables, held 10 people each, had a facilitator and a note taker at each table. USDA was fantastic. They actually, we had like 8-9 volunteer facilitators from USDA come in, as well as Keystone. And we kind of had everyone watch presentations. I did kind of an MP3 background. What is it? Why? What's the deal with that? We had Dennis Van Engelsdorp. We're really fortunate to have the Bee Informed Partnership housed at Maryland. He's a great bee researcher. He did kind of the issues with honeybees. Then we had Sam Droege from USGS come in and talk about native pollinators and how what we do for managed pollinators can also then affect native pollinators positively. Then we had our breakout sessions, kind of like what we're doing here, but with the small table groups. And we basically just dropped in these topics: agricultural, non-agricultural pest control. They discussed it, facilitator knew what was going on, non-biased, just had that discussion. Forage and nutrition was another, and pollinator, pest disease, and genetics. After that, these were maybe like 45-minute sessions where they were talking about. We had report outs and then electronic polling, which is really cool, and I'll get into that in a minute. We also had our ground rules. Julie requested that we kind of go over ground rules, and I had to laugh because if you'd like to know what our ground rules are, they're in your packet. For this meeting, they're the exact identical ground rules, so you already have them. But as far as I really like the electronic polling, and I liked the reaching out before the meeting because you get data like this. The question was, what topics are most important in improving pollinator health? And you can just see where education, you can see pre-meeting, kind of where everyone was at, post-meeting where everyone was at, and you can just see that the education, people, they come to this meeting to learn too, because they don't know all the other issues. And the things that they're learning, it's so beneficial, and it was really good response. So these are just and it's good stuff to have, thanks. So as far as PostSummit, I think I talked about this already. I will be drafting this thing soon, and I will be consulting our stakeholder groups for specific portions of this. We just really lucked out somehow. We have especially maybe one really enthusiastic stakeholder for each stakeholder group that has been contacting me. So that's really good. I'll also open it up for public comment once the draft's out, kind of taking all that information and obviously revisiting it. So as far as kind of feedback, if you wanted to go with an approach like this, I will say that honestly, the overwhelming majority was positive. Everyone really liked it. They applauded the department for having an approach like this because it was very involved. They felt very involved because they were. One of the things that I was getting before the meeting, I was kind of hearing is that some of the stakeholders think that your plan's already set in stone. You're throwing these meetings as a cover-up. That's what I'm hearing a lot of. And so I was kind of tested at our meeting with that when our stakeholders were like, so what exactly is this going to look like? Is this going to be regulatory? Is it going to be voluntary? And my response was wholeheartedly, I'm not sure yet. We're gonna literally, from the data that we receive from this meeting, I will make the plan from that. You can kind of see that sense of like, oh, okay, this is kind of, wow, okay, maybe this, because their input is what's making this, so. What else do we have here? Oh, we also, Keystone's idea, they included, if you're doing your stakeholder meetings, included a list of individuals that were at the meeting. They loved that. I had people, like that's like I said, my right-of-way company, or our utilities, you know what I mean? They were tickled to death to see there are other people there and know their names. We didn't hand it out ahead of time because like every state have a couple rogue people. Okay, thank you. And the bad was just that one of our stakeholder groups was like, I don't know that we were properly represented. It happened to be one of our beekeepers, and of the 160 people I invited, 48 of them were beekeepers. So I just can't go hold your hand and bring you to the meeting, but we did have, they were the only one that thought that. All the other beekeepers were very happy because we had beekeepers at our table. With that, thank you. We did get a really extensive, awesome report from our meeting with all of the feedback. If anyone's interested in that, it's available. If you're dealing with urban issues, small scale beekeepers, there's some really good information in that, and that's a terrible web address, but you can just Google Maryland Pollinator Plan and you'll find it. So, okay, thank you very much. Sorry. Okay, thanks.
Great, so we're gonna kind of fly across the country to another example. We'll take questions after everyone's presentations, but next we'll have George Hansen. He's past president of American Beekeeping Federation. He's gonna speak to his experience with the Oregon plan. And George, come on up.
Can I start talking?
You may.
So this really is not specifically an experience with an MP3. This is, but you may be able to glean some information about how this process worked that would apply to developing an MP3. Oregon is in its infancy and starting on a pollinator protection plan, but am I just hitting forward?
Yeah.
Oh, here. That's back.
I think that was
turned it off.
That was the eject button. Kicked you out of the driver's seat. Hold on.
Anyway,
There you go.
so the spray kill in Oregon in 2013 on linden trees caused some legislation that entered into the Oregon legislature it started out as an attempt to ban the use of neonicotinoids in Oregon. By the time it came out the other end of the legislature, it was a requirement that the governor name a task force to look into pollinator health. Okay, so yeah, I understand that button. Okay, and so literally this was a situation where there were ornamental linden trees in a parking lot at a Target store that were being, the pests on the landscape were being managed by contract by a landscape company, and they were using a variety of neonicotinoids on the trees even as they were blooming. I can't even believe that. I have queen bees at the Oakdale, California post office. I'll be right there. At any rate, so there were literally thousands, tens of thousands of dead bumblebees on the ground on the asphalt where it was easy to see them, and some person in the parking lot recognized that something was wrong and actually ended up with the Xerces Society, who it is based in Portland, Oregon, and the Xerces Society took it from there, and that was what the inspiration was behind all of this. And so the governor was required by the legislature to name this task force. So this is a little bit different. The members of the task force were actually named by the governor's staff. Actually, they hoisted it off on the Department of Agriculture, and so these were the people who were on there. And the one of these legislators, the Representative Reardon, was actually the author of the original legislation, and he thought he was going to be the chairman of the committee. But, yeah, I like to walk. But the legislation actually made him ex officio, so he couldn't be the chairman of the committee. Ramesh Sajili is the entomologist at Oregon State, honeybee specialist, and then you can see Association of Nurseries, Food and Shelters, URSES, Environmental Council, Associated Oregon Industries, which is a trade group for people that are selling things, like including, you know, big box stores and others, and then a beekeeper. So that was set. And so it wasn't a matter of like opening it up to stakeholders, but it was up to them to decide, well, what kind of stakeholders would need to be on this task force. So that's one way of doing it. I don't know that I would recommend it, but it's the way we did it, or were forced to do it. So I want to just remind you, this was a bumblebee kill. There were almost no dead honeybees involved. It was in a parking lot in a retail area. There were probably some dozens of honeybee hives within flying distance because there's residences around there, but this was not a honeybee situation. And yet, I found it ironic the way the task force went about this, because it very quickly became an issue about honeybee health. And we kind of forgot that we were talking about a bumblebee incident that was probably caused by, well, was caused, the investigation found some violations, and then there was a lot of just bad decision making and some other unfortunate situations which are being repeated even now. So it was a diverse group of stakeholders. The legislators were ex officio. I don't know why this isn't advancing. I have to say, the stakeholders that were chosen was a small group, but they all had a reason to try and solve this problem. It gets back to Jim Jones' comment about this is agriculture's problem, you better solve it or it's gonna come back on you in a regulatory sense. And so there was a great deal of interest, even though the interest was different from different sides. Everybody wanted to find some way of solving this problem, even while they were trying to protect their interests, which were different. We had wide-ranging discussions. We looked about all across the country for what other people were doing at that time, and everything went on the table without prejudice. I'm not saying that wasn't without heated discussion, but it was, nobody held anything against anybody. If you brought it up and put it on the table, then we gathered lots of resource material from other model programs. I'm not making this move. Okay, so then after quite a number of meetings and over a number of months, all the proposals were voted on, and a record of all votes was kept. And the task force revisited any proposals that had a majority but not a consensus to see if there was some way that it could be rephrased or restructured and would get consensus. It's locked up again. What did you do? And in the end, only those proposals which had consensus, everybody was signed on, were forwarded as the recommendations. So the stakeholders, all of the members of the task force were residents of Oregon. So there were some comments yesterday about keeping it local. But all of the members of the task force were associated in one way or another with national organizations. So don't be fooled into making the assumption that just because you try and keep it local, that you don't have any influence from national organizations. That's just nonsense. And all of the members that were there were paid representatives for their organization. that had jobs to protect and to enhance the image of their organization and so forth, except the beekeeper and the master gardener's representative, who is a retired agriculture department employee, were not compensated. So again, I'm not trying to prejudice you, I'm just saying that this is the truth of it is in almost every meeting of these, you will have representatives who are paid to do a job, and you have to expect them to do it. It turned out in our case that it became a bit of an issue. I'll talk about that briefly. Go ahead. But commercial applicators were not named and were not in the room, and yet their actions were a part of the reason we were brought in together. And I'm not too sure. I think that was an oversight. It was a mistake. And I would agree that these people need to be at the table because they're the ones that are doing some of the things that might be at issue. Go ahead. So some sidelights. So the task force did not recommend any restrictions on any pesticide. We talked about it, but there was no consensus. Yet, next. Even as we were meeting, the Department of Agriculture did ban the use of imidacloprid and dinotetrafuran and a few other neonicotinoids on linden trees in Oregon, applied in any way at any time of the year. And the registrant has agreed to go along with that and has cooperated. So even though, I guess my point there is that even though we didn't make any recommendations, that I don't know if the discussion did it or not, but there are other things that are happening at the same time that don't have to necessarily be connected to a program or a recommendation or an MP3. Another one, just an example, we did not recommend any restrictions on the pest control practices for growers that are selling plants labeled as pollinator friendly at the point of sale. This was an issue in Minnesota in particular, and we decided to not do that. And yet, at the same time, even as the representative of the retail group was fighting against any kind of idea of inserting that, many of their constituents were in fact making that choice on their own to do that. Go ahead. You can go through that. Next. So the thing that came out was that as we started, and ground rules and stuff, we decided it was going to be consensus. The naming of the chairman was really important. It had to be a person without a dog in the fight, as it was. We named the assistant professor from Oregon State University, and that worked really, really well. Outside facilitator is another way of getting around that. It just simply can't be driven by any particular issue carrier. The other thing that happened was that some of the representatives' job was to interact with the media and sell their story. And as we were meeting, and even before we made any decisions, some of these people continued to do their job and contact the media, write op-eds, make their case in the media. And we had to have that discussion and just say, until the task force has completed that's really getting in the way. And so in our case, that was something that we had to discuss and resolve. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that people will continue to do their jobs. Just because they're on a task force doesn't mean that they don't have to do that, but it did get in the way. So if you want to see what the task force recommendations were, there's the website to it. There are probably much easier ways to get to it than all of that, but at any rate, that's where they are, and you can see what the consensus was of a group of people that were motivated to find some solutions that were acceptable to all parties.
Okay, thanks, George. So we're going to head to the southwest, hear from Chuck Moses. He's an environmental scientist for the Plant Industry Division, Nevada Department of Agriculture. And Chuck, why don't you come on up? do it?
No, I'll stay at the
Okay.
podium here. You can just advance it with the arrow. Okay. Okay, I see Julie moved me ahead a little bit in my presentation. I was just going to give a quick overview of our program, and initially, you know, we decided we didn't want to do the MP3. You know, we've heard from Oregon, and we heard from Ashley today in Maryland's program, and I pretty much thought, well, you know, for our state, Nevada, there's not a whole lot of agricultural acres. We have 2 commercial beekeepers that come through the state at different times of the year, and most of the beekeepers that we have are hobbyists. So, you know, for me, when I started hearing the news about neonicotinoids and some of the other issues affecting bee health, you know, it just didn't seem like it was going to be something we were going to do. EPA asked us, well, geez, are you planning to do a MP3? And I said, nah, we're probably not going to do that. So I hadn't heard anything. But the more that these national stories started hitting the news, and people started asking questions the Department of Ag of what we were going to do with neonicotinoids, and when are we going to start canceling those products. And I know we have a lot of imidacloprid use, for example, in our state, but it's mostly in urban settings. So again, I was trying to avoid doing this. You know, this looked like a lot of extra work. There's no resources to go along with the development of the plan. So we just developed some fact sheets that we placed up on our web page. You know, on my environmental services page, we link the EPA information there if folks want to get it. And I thought, well, I'm good. I don't think I'll do anything else after this, right? Well, this just generated more questions, more emails about pesticides. And I thought, well, gosh, this isn't going to work. We have a lot of people still asking questions. At our board meetings, people were asking questions about pollinator protection, and our board and administration says, well, you know, we better start thinking about this because we're having to deal with a lot of questions and issues from folks. So, I mean, what I like to always do is just say, look, we do have a regulatory program. I mean, essentially, we used to have a bee program, an apiarist who used to work for us, and you know, we inspected hives and that kind of thing, but it was kind of dismantled when that individual left. And this is kind of the regulation that we're left with, you know. Notification was the most important thing, and even in our MP3 now that we developed, we do go into detail about notification process that we're going to put in place. But, you know, apparently there's other issues too. And, you know, again, just educating myself, looking at all the other issues that affect bee health, you know, I thought this would be the best course that we would take, is use this MP3 process to look at some of the other things. There certainly is a pesticide component because we are the regulatory agency, but there's a lot of things that we do now that we think, you know, as far as education goes and working with the various cooperative extension people of getting the information out to folks. So, as you can see, we changed our mind, decided to go ahead and do this. And really, I keep saying we. Our state is small enough that really all the work was kind of fell on me to do this. And I know I needed some help. So essentially, I approached our state entomologist and said, you know, I know we're going to get questions about bee biology and the different, you know, pollinators that we have in our state, and I need you to be involved. Well, he traditionally take a hands-off approach when it comes to my regulatory program in the state. He doesn't want to have nothing to do with me. But I talked him into helping out, especially when our boss said, you know, you will help him with this, by the way. And so begrudgingly, he's been involved, but he's been a great resource. So what I wanted to do is just kind of, you know, as you can see, we just approved this MP3. And I started really quickly, you know, I said, look, if I'm going to involve some folks besides our state entomologists, we have 2 small associations of beekeepers in our state. Northern Nevada Beekeepers Association, the other one's Mason Valley. And the guy that used to work as the apiarist is in the association up north. And we also had some individuals that have worked for our department over the past that have been part of the process. This is a surprising group here. You know, once we got the word out that we were going to do this, folks started saying, yeah, I'm interested. Can I be on your team? And sure, why not? Anybody that asked to get on the team or had a comment on what should go into our plan, we said, yeah, we're going to put you on our stakeholder team. So if the next slide here I'm going to show you is basically we'll go through some of the folks that I have on the list. And this is our stakeholder team. For some of the states that, you know, have large beekeeping associations and lots of agriculture out there, you probably look at that list and say, geez, that looks kind of small. But really, I think it addresses most of the concerns, because if you look across some of the different agencies we have, you know, you see we have a few Department of Ag people. That was what one of the comments somebody said, you got too many NDA folks on this, and it's not going to be good. Richard Hicks of the Southern Nevada Beekeeper Association, he used to work for the Mosquito Abatement District in Southern Nevada, so he was a terrific resource, really reasonable. Joy Patterson, the University Cooperative Extension expert on bees, we have her on there. Jim Schaefer, Washoe County Vector Control. You should go down this list. We have our industry reps here too, who have been very supportive of the plan and right from the start interested in getting involved. In Southern Nevada, you know, the big issue is Africanized bees, and the industry folks there said, look, we don't want to be hamstrung by this plan, so we can't do our work to control Africanized bees down there. So we made it very clear from the start that this is not a regulatory plan. It's all voluntary, and the folks that are on here says, we want to make this work. We think it's a good approach. We don't want to see any additional regulations. So those kind of things worked out really well. We have an aerial applicator, and as you can see, there's an individual from Beyond Pesticides. You know, when we started coming to the face-to-face meetings, we only had two. I thought, you know, we were going to have a Donald Trump type rally at one of these meetings, but it never materialized. It was a real reasonable discussion. We didn't have anybody trying to shut the meeting down. And as you can see, there's some tribal reps on there too. One of the Region 9 people from EPA contacted us and said, have you thought about involving the tribes? I said, no, because I'm under the impression they're doing their own program. And most of them don't have the resources even to put together a simple plan like we did. So we invited them to the table, and they've been submitting comments as well. Other people, we have a dealer from Simplot who's also a pest control advisor, so that worked out really well for us. And so, you know, a couple of growers and, like it says, industry reps. So we have a really good balance. And anyone who says, hey, I want to be on your committee, well, we essentially said, yep, that's fine. We're going to put you on the committee. And most of the conversations we have are via email. This is the last letter that I had sent out telling folks about some more organizational meetings that we're going to have, give them input opportunities. But everybody that's on that list has an email address. And when I send out the different versions, we went through 3 versions in a year and addressed every comment that folks had submitted, and then ended up with the final version, and no one said this stinks or this is no good or whatever. They all the feedback was very positive, said we like the approach you're taking. I mean, essentially the cornerstone of our plan is to get this notification system up, and that's what we're planning on doing. You know, we have a GIS guy down at the division and a department, and he says, look, we can set this up for you up on your webpage. We're going to put in a link, and we got this GIS program. They can just go ahead and click on a map, and all this stuff will be populated. Okay, great. That sounds terrific. Then we found out, well, oh, you only need about $3,500 for the license for that GIS package. I says, well, there's no resources. Sorry, can't do that. And, you know, I says, this all looks real nice, but this is kind of where we are right now. If somebody wants to register their hives on our webpage, you'll have to submit a piece of paper. And I got our state entomologist to get some of his staff people to get that into our webpage so that folks can use that and applicators can find out where these guys are located. And, you know, for the most part, you heard from other folks who were saying, geez, people don't want to voluntarily register their hives. Well, that's not what we're hearing from the beekeepers that have been involved. Most of them aren't worried about theft or someone else, doing something to their hive or finding their prime locations, and they're willing to register. So that's kind of where we are. Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Todd Peterson. He's the stewardship lead for Winfield, and he's going to be talking about his experience in Minnesota. So we're headed to the Midwest. And Todd does not have slides, so we will just put this one up for you.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I didn't bring slides. I didn't want to leave an evidence trail. Then Julie told me this is going to be recorded anyway, so this may be used against me. I want to set the stage with a little bit about who we are at Winfield. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of the Land O'Lakes Federated Cooperative System. Land O'Lakes has 3 business units. Winfield is the crop input business. Purina Feed we own, everything but dog and cat. And then everybody knows us for our dairy products. So my point there in helping you understand where we're coming from is that we're a little bit different. Once I establish that, I'm going to give you 3 points and then the example of the Minnesota Pollinator Summit I attended. So our 3 business units span the food value chain, from crop inputs to feed to consumer branded dairy products. So we're a little bit different in our span across this. Also, we are owned by farmers. So we are owned by our customers. The same dairy producers that we buy products from and we sell products to are our owners, different than a stockholder-owned organization. We're committed to sustainability, and because that we are owned by our customers, we have kind of a unique responsibility to help our growers, who are also our customers, be more sustainable and be good stewards of the resources. So that brings me to our first point. Farmers really do want to do the right thing. Many farmers